In this video, I'll be talking about Toronto's new vacant home tax and how it impacts every homeowner in the city. So let's start with an overview of this new tax regime. As of January 1st, 2023, the City of Toronto has imposed an annual tax on vacant Toronto residences called the Vacant Home Tax, also known as VHT. The VHT was enacted to combat the city's dwindling supply of housing by effectively discouraging homeowners and property investors from leaving their residential properties unoccupied. Properties that are considered vacant homes are subject to a tax of 1% of the property's current value assessment, also known as CVA. So let's break down what this is all about. First off, who is required to file a VHT declaration? Well, the short answer is everyone that owns residential property in Toronto has to file a VHT declaration. The law is extremely clear that all residential property owners must file a declaration regarding their occupancy status for the property or properties that they own on a yearly basis. The declaration will determine whether a home is considered vacant and therefore VHT applies and is payable, and the deadline for filing that declaration is February 2nd of this year. Now, the City of Toronto has made the filing process a bit easier by making it an online application. I've included a link for the online filing portal in the description below, so make sure you go and check that out. So the second question then is, what kind of residential property is subject to VHT? Well, the law states that a residential property is considered vacant and therefore subject to VHT if A, the property is not used as the principal residence by the owners, B, the property is not the principal residence of a permitted occupant, such as a family member or a friend of the registered owner, or C, the property is unoccupied by one or more tenants for a total of 6 months of a given tax year. Additionally, if homeowners fail to file a declaration about their VHT status by February 2nd, their property would be deemed to be vacant and therefore subject to VHT. So make sure you go and file your VHT declaration as soon as possible, and don't forget about it. Now, it's important to note that a person can only claim one principal residence. A principal residence is where you receive mail and pay your bills. For homeowners that spend extended periods of time traveling for more than 6 months a year, such as snowbirds or people who travel consistently for work, a property may technically not be considered a vacant home and therefore not subject to VHT if that property is their principal residence for at least 6 months of the taxation year. So before getting to our final point, it's worth mentioning that a property may be left vacant and exempt from paying VHT under very narrow circumstances. A vacant property may be exempt if A, the property is vacant due to the death of an owner, B, the property is undergoing repairs and renovations, C, the principal resident is in a hospital, long-term care facility, or some sort of a supportive care facility, D, if you had purchased a vacant home in the previous year, E, if the property is required for employment purposes by an owner who has a principal residence outside of the GTA, or F, if there's a court order enforced that prohibits occupancy of that property. Now, it is important to keep in mind that these exemptions have strict criteria and require filing of additional supporting documentation. What I've done is I've included a link in the description below to help you determine whether a specific occupancy status is subject to VHT and if there's any kind of exemptions that may apply to you and the additional filing documents that you might need to prove that exemption. That said, it's important that you go over your specific situation with an accountant or a lawyer just to make sure that you're not filing anything incorrectly. So finally, the third question is, how much does VHT cost? Well, according to the city, VHT is taxed at 1% of the vacant home's current value assessment, or CVA. For example, if a property's CVA is $800,000, you would need to pay a VHT of $8,000. The CVA can be found in a yearly notice sent out by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, also known as MPAC, and those who are subject to VHT will be issued a vacant tax notice between March and April, and payment of that tax will be due on May 1st. So from our discussion of VHT, it's obvious that this law impacts everyone who owns property here in Toronto. Here are some of the key takeaways. Firstly, every homeowner must file a declaration for each property that they own that's located here in Toronto. That means that even if you own only one home and it's your primary residence, you need to file this declaration before February 2nd of this year. People who live outside of Toronto, Ontario, and even Canada that own property here in Toronto must also file this declaration. Secondly, VHT may be payable in certain circumstances, most commonly if you have an investment property that is left vacant for 6 months or more of each year. Those with a portfolio of investment properties need to be especially careful in managing their rental properties so that they ensure that they aren't paying VHT on several different homes. Thirdly, if you're buying or selling a home here in Toronto, you'll need to make sure that a declaration has been filed and proof of payment of VHT may be necessary before closing a deal. Now, as always, guys, it's important to hire a realtor and a lawyer who are aware of the impacts of VHT and consult with them on a regular basis. Even if you aren't buying or selling a home, this law impacts every homeowner with residential property here in the city. Filing can be done online, but given the complexity of how a home is considered vacant and subject to VHT, it may be worthwhile consulting a professional to ensure that you aren't filing things incorrectly on a VHT declaration. That's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, make sure to click the like button and subscribe. And as always, I hope to see you guys soon. Thanks.